Will Apple win in its showdown with the big banks? And what surprises were announced at IFA?
Vertical Hold is proudly brought to you by Alcatel.
Welcome to Vertical Hold, the tech show where we channel surf through the headlines in search of the big picture. I'm Alex Kidman, and I'm not joined by Adam Turner because he's half a world away in Berlin at the big IFA trade show, checking out the latest in technology. He'll be along shortly with a special report, but in the meantime, for this week only, I've doubled down on Kidman's with our special guest, finder.com.au editor-in-chief Angus Kidman. Angus, welcome back to the show.
It's a pleasure to be here as always.
Now, on with the news. If you're a Dropbox user, the time to change your password is right now, after the company admitted that some 68 million user account passwords were leaked. That's a lot of cloud storage potentially compromised, and to make matters worse, the credentials were stolen back in 2012. Dropbox says it's contacted all users and forced a mandatory reset on passwords, but if all of this is news to you and you're a Dropbox user, go and change your password, and while you're at it, maybe kick in two-factor authentication as well. Google still hasn't announced its next Nexus phones, although it's widely tipped that HTC's scored the contract to actually make them. The latest rumour suggests that they won't actually be Nexus phones to speak of, with Google apparently keen to drop that particular branding for its own label smartphones. Apple is holding an event next week to launch, well, it hasn't actually said what it is actually launching. Could it be the Apple car? Maybe the long-heralded flat-panel Apple TV? Well, look, okay, it's going to be the iPhone 7. And in Australian terms, the launch will start next Thursday morning at 3 a.m. sharp. If history's any guide, you can expect pre-sales to start quite quickly afterwards and actual sales to commence roughly about a fortnight later. Vodafone has announced it'll commence 5G trials in Australia later this year. Don't get all excited and throw your existing phone in the trash, however, because, like every other telco on the planet, 5G is still more of an idea than a formalised standard, with actual consumer networks not expected to go into operation until 2020 at the earliest. So Angus, the iPhone 7 is due to be announced next week, and no doubt we'll be discussing that at length in the next episode. But right now what we have, of course, is the iPhone 7 pre-release rumour frenzy. But there don't seem to be that many rumours around, as we've discussed in previous episodes. Perhaps this whole dropping headphone thing. Now, I know you're not particularly an iPhone user at all, or all that much of an Apple fan, but would dropping the headphone jack mean a great deal to you?
It wouldn't massively impact me in that way. I think the big challenge, the really odd thing, Apple has a history of doing this stuff. It's been good at getting rid of things first to get rid of the floppy drive, first to get rid of the CD-ROM, all the rest of it. So it can lead the market there. My biggest concern with them saying, well, you don't need that, you can use Bluetooth. Bluetooth is a power suck fest, and the iPhone already doesn't have the best reputation for battery. So
that's putting it politely, yes.
And since I think that's one of the things people would like to see from the iPhone 7 is really improved battery life in that space, I think combining that with saying, hey, let's just use Bluetooth all the time, could prove to be problematic. So I think that's the issue that Apple will have to grapple with.
Generally speaking, of course, also, iPhone launches are big hype fests. They always have been, but they've always been attended with, massive sales. But recently, especially within Australia, those sales figures, whilst Apple doesn't release local ones, don't appear to have been as impressive, have they?
No, there's been a slippage from where Apple was definitely dominant to a point now where the leading Apple phone and the leading Samsung Galaxy phone are pretty much neck and neck, and that's not a bad thing. It reflects, a level of consumer choice. The expectations are high for this because everyone thinks that every second generation of iPhone release is the big one. So everyone's been going, well, it's not an S release, it's the next big number. It should matter. It's getting harder to impress people with phones because they're all pretty good. They've been able to do what we want. But I say that, actually, this year people have generally been really impressed with what Samsung brought to the table. We didn't think there was a lot more to be done to the Galaxy, and actually they've had a consistently good run. There's no reason to assume that Apple can't achieve the same sort of goal and just come up with a device that, even if it doesn't have some revolutionary new feature, just feels like the best combination of iPhone features. So I won't be surprised if they sell a lot, but I will be surprised if they go back to being an unquestioned number one in the local market.
And now we cross over to the other side of the planet, where Adam Turner is standing by to give us the rundown on all the big news coming out of IFA. Adam, are you there?
Right, so this week I'm over in Berlin at the IFA Technology Trade Show. I'm here with sound and image editor Jez Ford. Jez, welcome to the show.
Good day there, Adam.
We've just come out of the Sony keynote, and we had a bit of a sneak peek at some of the Sony high-res audio gear. Jez, you're a bit of an audiophile. What have you seen that grabbed your interest?
Well, that was what I was delighted with, was they led with the audio. So Sony's been sort of championing high-res audio, which for a big company is a good thing, since IFA in 2013, I think their first launch was.
Yeah.
And this year they've got a new headphone amplifier, which is really bells and whistles. It's got like 7 ways to get your headphone output out of it and about 6 ways to put your music into it.
Yeah.
And they've got a high-res Walkman, 2 of them in fact, one of them gold-plated. It's a marvellous thing.
Yeah.
Essential, of course, the gold plating. We did a bit of comparison with the gold and the standard, didn't we?
Yeah, I think you need to be in like the cone of silence to really be able to pick the difference. I was struggling,
Yeah. And also headphones, of course. They've got high-res headphones, by which they mean that they go to higher frequencies than you can get off a CD. They sound up to 120 kilohertz, although the rest of their equipment goes to 80 kilohertz, and that's so far beyond human hearing that the main advantage of it is you can do the audio filtering at a much higher frequency, so you don't mess up the audible band with phase problems.
So it's not that your dog can borrow your headphones and still get good sound.
That's it, exactly.
Okay. And they've got a different kind of a 4.4mm headphone jack on them.
Yeah, this is new. I haven't seen it before. They were telling us that this has been, it's a sort of G to Japanese standard that Japanese companies may take up. It's balanced, which means as opposed to your normal mini jack or quarter-inch jack, it's got separate left-right earths, so that it's a much better separated signal.
Yeah.
And all done through a slightly larger multi-shank mini jack.
Yeah.
So, I mean, part of it is they're saying it's larger so there's a better connection, but mainly that you can get a balance through a single mini jack plug.
Yeah. But it's a different size jack, and they haven't just put a 4.4mm and got rid of the standard 3.5mm jack like some companies do. We won't mention.
Exactly.
This thing's actually got both on the top. So
that's right.
And when we asked them, do you think there'll come a day where you get rid of the 3.5mm? They're like, oh, probably not, but we'll see. They're obviously not in a rush to try and make this the new de facto standard. Do you think that would be, because it's not a Sony proprietary thing, is it?
No, not at all. Other companies are going to use it as well, and it's a bit odd, really. They're going completely the other way to what Apple's rumored to be doing shortly by removing the headphone jack altogether. They've now got 2 headphone jacks on their product, so they've gone completely the other way.
And would that headphone jack be overkill if it wasn't connected to a high-res audio player, do you think?
Well, you need balanced headphones. It's more about the headphones. So you need balanced headphones in order to use it.
Yeah.
And I mean, high-res audio is, some people can't really hear the difference anyway. So there's a question over how useful high-res audio is.
Yeah.
If you're out on the road with a portable, there's very little point in listening to high-res audio because the extra detail and stuff will just get lost in the wash anyway.
Yeah.
It's more a home listening thing. So on a headphone amp, it makes more sense because that's a headphone amp for the home, where you can sit in quiet and listen to this beautiful music.
Yeah.
Whereas, a high-res Walkman, if you're using it on the street,
Yeah, well, that's just what we found trying to test it in there. This was, they had the high-end music, the DD. What was the sound format they had that Miles Davis was in?
That was just 2496 FLAC, I think. I don't think it was DSD.
Yeah, and I think there was some DSD on there as well.
There was some DSD on there, certainly.
That's a new high-res format, is it?
No, this is controversial as well. Some people, it's basically an argument against PCM, which is, as we've had on CDs for a long time, and DSD, which was came from the format that was used on Super Audio CDs. And knocks everything down to an incredibly fast 1-bit stream and works with it like that. It does strange things at the high frequencies. If you look at the very high frequencies, there's more distortion on them, but the claim is that because it shifted the distortion to the higher frequencies, there's less distortion at the lower frequencies, so it sounds better. Frankly, they're both so far above CD quality that they're both great. So the argument is a little superfluous, really.
So as we speak, we don't have pricing on this gold-plated player yet, but we're thinking north of $3-4 grand Australian.
That's right. The headphone amp, we just got the pricing through at 2899 Australian, but we don't know how much the Walkman will be yet.
Now, I was a bit surprised because they've also got a new entry-level high-res Walkman, but the price has gone up a little bit. It's gone up from about, the old one, last year's model, was about 280 Australian. This new one's 350 Australian. It's got a slightly bigger screen and it's a touchscreen, but in terms of sound quality, it seems to be pretty much the same thing. I thought maybe they'd be trying to get the price down, and I was ready to write a story that says, Sony drops the price to down near 200 to try and get the mainstream appeal, but they've hardly paid any attention to that model at all. So they really seem to be going for your well-heeled spenders. Do you think there'll come a time where they will try and win over your average punter who's happy with the MP3?
Well, these are the little coloured ones?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, they have added DSD, I think, to this one.
Okay.
So
but is that overkill for a unit of that size aimed at someone who's looking to spend $300?
It's not a point of it being overkill. The point is, if you've collected music in a variety of formats, and then your machine can only play one of the formats, you're stuck with music that you can't play on it.
Yeah.
So it's more about compatibility with a wider range of files.
But do you think that clearly what we've seen today, it was all about that high-end stuff, people with a few grand to drop on something like this. Do you think they're ever going to try and push it as a mainstream rival to your traditional sort of MP3 style player?
I think in terms of a portable, I think what we have to concentrate on is getting CD quality music. I think going beyond is nice and all, but I mean for portable, CD quality is well enough. I'm no fan of your low-res MP3s. Once you get down to 128K, even 256K, you really can hear the grunge, particularly at the high end. The cymbals get mushed up and stuff. Once you get to 320K or CD quality, really, I mean that's, it's lovely. That's what we're used to. I've got no problem with that at all. Unless, of course, there's a turntable available.
So we've also got some new noise-cancelling headphones from Sony. There's some interesting stuff there because they're trying to do high-res through wireless. Is that right?
Well, yes. The high-res side is a bit controversial again because it's Bluetooth noise-cancelling headphones. Now, Bluetooth can't carry high-res audio. It's not fast enough to carry high-res audio. Sony has introduced their own codec, which is called LDAC. I've been trying to work this out for months. They say it goes through at 990 kilobits a second, which Bluetooth simply can't handle within what they call the profile, the stereo A2DP profile. So we were talking to them today. They say that in actual fact, they add a little bit of data from somewhere else to get up to that speed. And what they get is kinda high-res audio, by which I take it to mean it's a lossy codec, so little information is lost. But if they're getting it better than CD quality that way, it's an achievement anyway, but they shouldn't really stick the high-res audio sticker on the box. But the noise cancelling was excellent. They did a comparison. They had two rival brands. They had Bose and Beats in there. And the Bose QC35s are great noise cancellers. They're some of the best noise cancelling in the business.
Yeah, they always get a good rep.
And in the comparison, and of course you have to be very dubious of a comparison set up by one company showing another company's products, but certainly it seemed to be effective. They said they've used JTEC, which is the Japanese organization's, Uber organization as it were, standards for measuring it. And from the demo, it's very good noise cancelling.
Cool. All right, Jez, thanks for joining us.
Well, it's a pleasure.
So this, the ongoing stoush between three of the big four banks and Apple continues, and this week Apple's submission to the ACCC became public, and it wasn't entirely surprising news what Apple's position was it?
No, so Apple had briefly stated its position in a one-page letter to the ACCC. Now it's brought out the big guns, which is a 65-page report, extra data commissioned from economists. Yeah,
ideal bedtime reading.
Oh, it was spectacular bedtime reading. But in essence, its message boiled down to the same key points it wanted to make, which was it's not given up NFC access for anybody in Australia or anywhere else in the world, and it doesn't see why the regulator should get involved and say, hey, you have to negotiate with the banks, when on its account one of the banks has refused to negotiate and even sign a basic confidentiality agreement. So Apple has dug its heels in and said, nah, we don't see that there's any merit in allowing banks to do special negotiating they wouldn't allow to do otherwise. They should just continually commercially negotiating the way that we have with banks all over the world.
So out of the big four banks, you've got one bank that actually does have an Apple Pay deal, one bank which apparently won't even talk to Apple at all, and then the other two.
And also, I should put Adelaide and Bendigo Bank are in on this and probably get very upset when they get left out of that list all the time.
We love little banks as well, but they're not the ones that draw in a lot of people's interest, I guess. Does Apple have a point? I mean, is this just about the money value of these transactions, or is it another one of those classic kind of Apple control things? Because they don't, they want to control what apps go onto the phones. They definitely want to control the storage on the phones, things like that. Is this just Apple doing the same thing?
It's a little bit of both. I think there's no basis at all in competition law for the banks to be able to go to the ACCC and say, hey, we want to be able to demand access to this particular technology, NFC, contactless payments, because that is available on other devices. They've got that option. So on that level, I think Apple is actually on really sound legal grounds. And I think, honestly, that the banks are just trying to use it as a tactic because they'd like Apple to take a little bit less of a cut of each transaction when that goes on. However, that said, I think Apple's claim that it can't possibly open up access to NFC because that will create a world of security hurt is not really logical, because we've seen this rolled out on lots and lots of Android devices. There have been reports, which Apple is happy to cite, of potential issues with that, but the fact is it has not turned into a big real world problem. So I think Apple are wrong about the spirit of what they're doing, but they're right about the law, and they're probably going to win this one.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to admit, when NFC first hit on the iPhone, my immediate thought was, great. Not just the payments angle, but all the other things that you can do with NFC, quick and easy pairing and stuff like that. And that was immediately washed away with a, no, if it's not us, we're not doing it at all. And that's a very classic Apple control move. But yeah, I suspect you're right. They'll probably win the legal side of this one. And even if their control mania is showing.
Yeah. And I think the point to make here is that while it's interesting, it's great to have these options on your phone, Australians are massive users of just contactless payments from their credit cards, much more so than the US, where Apple Pay first launched. So in the US, the first time many people ever did a contactless payment was with their phone. In Australia, you'll be hard pressed to find anyone over the age of 21 who doesn't do it regularly to pay for things. So, I think we might like it, we might find it convenient, but I don't think Australians are going to feel like they're suffering for the lack of it for a little while.
So, do you think it's safe to say that Apple probably doesn't have the 13 billion euros it owes the Irish government in an Australian bank?
I think it's probably safe to say that, because Apple doesn't bank anything in Australia and routes all of our local stuff through Singapore, so it's floating around in a bank somewhere else.
Well, that just about wraps it up for this episode of Vertical Hold. Remember, if you've got any comments, hit us up in the comments section on YouTube, via Twitter, or the Facebook Vertical Hold page. Thanks to Adam and his guests at IFA, as well as Angus, for joining us for the show.
My pleasure. Winona forever.
Thanks for listening, and remember, if you like what you hear, hit that subscribe button. Vertical Hold is proudly brought to you by Alcatel.